Working the night shift was never something I dreamed of, but the pay was decent, and I needed to cover my bills. It's one of those roadside gas stations in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and darkness. The only light around came from the flickering convenience store sign, which kept blinking like it was ready to give out. The night started off quiet, as usual. Only a few cars stopped by, most of them just to refuel and leave without even coming inside. Around 2 a.m., a guy walked in. Tall, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up and worn-out jeans. He looked nervous, glancing around like he was searching for someone or something. He only grabbed a bottle of water and paid with a crumpled bill. He barely said a word other than a dry, "Good evening." But the way he avoided eye contact made me uneasy. After he left, I went back to my phone, trying to shake off the weird vibe he left behind. But not even 20 minutes later, he came back. This time, though, he was wearing different clothes, a black shirt and a leather jacket. At first I thought it was someone else, but his face was unmistakable. He walked slowly through the store, grabbed a pack of gum near the register, and this time, he looked me straight in the eye. That's when I saw it. His jacket was open, and something shiny was tucked at his waist. A gun. My heart started pounding, but I pretended not to notice. As he placed the gum on the counter, my hands began to sweat. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my face heating up, and I avoided looking at the thing on his waist. He didn't seem in a hurry, which only made everything feel more unsettling. He grabbed the gum, pulled some money out of his pocket, and silently placed a $5 bill on the counter. I thanked him, my voice trembling slightly, and handed him his change, not even sure if he would take it. But he did. He took the change, gave a small smile, almost as if he was amused by my nervousness, and walked out slowly. I froze for a few seconds after he left. I looked at the clock. 2:25 a.m. There was a phone behind the counter, and for a moment I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? A guy bought gum and might have a gun? It didn't make any sense. He hadn't done anything wrong, at least not yet. But the fact that he came back wearing different clothes and acted so strangely put me on edge. I kept staring out into the darkness, waiting to see car lights or any sign he was still around. There was nothing. Just silence, heavier than ever. I tried to distract myself by organizing the shelves near the counter, but I couldn't get his image out of my head. The open jacket, the glimpse of the gun. Why did he come back? Why change clothes? None of it made sense, and that only made it worse. Every time the automatic door made that annoying beep as it opened, I jumped. But it was always the wind or some bug flying near the sensor. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard something that wasn't the wind. Footsteps. Quick, coming from outside. I ran back behind the counter and checked the security cameras, trying to see what was going on. No one was in the frame, just the gas pumps and the empty road in the background. My heart was pounding so hard, I almost fell over when the door suddenly opened. It was him again. This time, no jacket, just the black shirt from before. He was sweaty, and his expression seemed different, heavier, like something had happened outside. This time, he didn't wander through the aisles. He walked straight up to the counter, shoved his hands into his pockets, and stared at me. I didn't know what to do. He just stood there, staring at me like he was waiting for me to say something. My mouth was dry, and any attempt to speak would have come out as a stutter. After what felt like forever, he let out a low laugh, almost as if he was trying to mess with me. "Busy night, huh?" he said, his hands still in his pockets. It was the first time he said more than a word, but the tone was unsettling, cold, like he was testing me. I nodded, trying not to show how nervous I was, and muttered something like, "Yeah, you could say that." He laughed again, but this time took a step back, pulling one of his hands out of his pocket. My stomach dropped. But instead of drawing the gun I was sure he had, he just pulled out an already open pack of gum and popped a piece into his mouth. He chewed it slowly, staring at me like he had all the time in the world. Then, without warning, he turned around and walked out. I stood frozen, but this time I went to the door to see where he was going. He didn't get into a car, wasn't in the parking lot. He disappeared into the darkness as if he was never there. I stood by the door, waiting to hear the sound of a car starting or some movement that would prove he was still around. But there was nothing. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights in the store. I went back to the counter and tried to make sense of everything. He had something planned, I was sure of it, but for some reason, he didn't follow through. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment. Maybe he was testing me. The image of the gun at his waist wouldn't leave my mind, and that small smile he gave before leaving felt like he was mocking my fear. Around 3:30 a.m., I decided to check the security cameras again. I re-watched the moments he entered and left. The first time, in the gray hoodie. The second, in the leather jacket with the gun clearly visible. And the third, just in the black shirt. Something strange caught my attention. On his third visit, he didn't appear coming from the parking lot, at least not on camera. He just seemed to appear out of nowhere, already near the store just outside the frame. My stomach churned. I started to wonder if he was still out there, hiding somewhere. After re-watching the footage, the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Every noise outside made my heart race, and every shadow seemed alive. I tried to convince myself he was gone, that he was just some lunatic trying to scare me, but nothing could shake the uneasiness. I couldn't stay still. I got up, went to the door, and locked it for the first time that night. The sound of the lock clicking gave me a false sense of security. But what if he was still out there? That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, like someone walking right outside the store, close to the wall. I ran to the cameras again, but saw nothing. I grabbed my phone and thought about calling the police. But how could I explain what was happening? A strange guy showed up 3 times, and now might or might not be lurking outside. As I tried to decide, the footsteps stopped. The silence returned, and with it, a chill ran down my spine. I waited, frozen, staring at the locked door, but he never came back. When the sun finally rose, the only thing left was the fear that he might return someday. I worked as a cleaner at a Montessori school for a few years, and I never thought such a peaceful place could leave me so shaken. My shifts were always at night, after the students had gone home, and the halls were quiet. It was just a normal routine, nothing special. But that night, something felt off. As soon as I walked in, I felt this strange uneasiness, like the air was heavier than usual. I thought it was just exhaustion. I went about my work, cleaning one classroom at a time, listening to the sound of water in the mop bucket and the squeaking of the mop on the wooden floor. Everything was normal until, around 9 p.m., a phone started ringing. The sound came from a room at the end of the hall. At first, I was confused because I knew everyone had left, and that room had been locked since earlier in the day. I walked over, convincing myself that someone must have forgotten their phone. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a cell phone. It was the classroom's landline ringing. I don't remember ever hearing that phone ring before, maybe because it was never used. I picked it up hesitantly and said a nervous, "Hello." On the other end, a woman's voice quickly responded, thanking me for answering. She introduced herself as a teacher named Emily and said she was locked in one of the rooms. My heart raced. I had never heard of a teacher named Emily at that school. I asked the voice for more details, trying to stay calm, but my hands were already sweaty. She said she was trapped in the art room on the 2nd floor and needed help getting out. My first instinct was to believe her. After all, who would lie about something like that? But as I climbed the stairs, something started to bother me. I knew all the teachers at the school, even if only by sight, and there was no one named Emily. Still, I decided to check it out. When I got to the 2nd floor hallway, the silence was so complete that even my breathing sounded too loud. I opened the art room door slowly, expecting to find someone inside, but it was completely empty. Everything was in its place, no one there. I pulled out my phone to call the principal, thinking he might know what was going on. But before I could dial, the landline started ringing again. This time, the sound came from another room, 2 doors down. I froze for a few seconds, feeling a chill run down my spine. The only thing that made me walk to the other room was the thought that, if this was some sort of prank, I needed to put an end to it quickly. When I entered the room, the phone had already stopped ringing. It was dark inside, but something in the air felt strange. A faint smell of burnt chalk mixed with mildew. Before I could leave, I heard a soft sound, like faint footsteps, coming from the hallway I had just walked through. That feeling of being watched started to consume me. I walked back to the hallway, trying to convince myself the footsteps were just my imagination. When I got to the doorway, I looked both ways and saw nothing. The place was as empty as it should be. But then, the phone started ringing again, this time coming from the music room at the end of the hall. I don't know what gave me the courage to go there, but my curiosity mixed with a sense of duty, like I needed to figure out what was happening. I opened the door slowly, and there it was, the landline phone on the teacher's desk, ringing insistently. I picked it up again, and the same voice spoke, but this time it sounded different, more hurried, almost desperate. "You need to help me," she said, as though on the verge of panic. I asked her where exactly she was, and her answer sent chills through me. "I'm in the music room. With you." My hand froze on the phone, and my eyes scanned the entire room. There was no one there. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. Before I could say anything, the call disconnected. That's when I noticed something at the back of the room. The instruments were all covered, as they should be, but the grand piano had its lid open, and one key was pressed down, emitting a continuous, muffled sound. I knew no one had touched it. I had been alone the whole time. I just wanted to get out of there. I grabbed my bag and ran toward the staff room, thinking I could call someone for help and leave the school as fast as possible. As I descended the stairs, I heard another noise behind me. Something hit the floor with a loud crash, like a chair being knocked over. I instinctively turned around and saw one of the second-floor doors swaying slightly, as if someone had just passed through it. The air felt heavy, and I had that kind of chill that you can't explain, like the atmosphere itself was pushing me to leave. When I got to the staff room, I went straight to the locker where I kept my belongings. As soon as I opened it, the landline in that room started ringing too. I knew I shouldn't answer it, but I couldn't help myself. Curiosity and fear mixed together, and before I realized it, I was holding the receiver to my ear. "Why did you leave?" the voice asked, softer this time, almost a whisper. It was the same woman, but something about her tone was different, colder, more unsettling. "I need you. Don't leave me alone here." Before I could respond, something metallic clattered on her end of the line, sharp and abrupt. I hung up immediately and threw the receiver back onto the cradle, trying to convince myself none of this was real. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my bag tightly and rushed to the main door, but when I reached it, something made me stop. The door, which should have been unlocked, wouldn't budge. I tried turning the handle with all my strength, but it wouldn't move, as if it were stuck. I looked back and felt a wave of dread wash over me. All the lights in the hallway had started flickering, one by one, until the entire place was plunged into darkness. My body felt frozen, but my senses were heightened to the point where every breath I took seemed deafening. The silence was broken by a soft, unsettling sound. Murmurs, faint but unmistakable, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. They seemed to be closing in. With no other options, I bolted into the nearest room and locked the door behind me. I chose the library, a place that usually brought me some sense of peace, but now felt as threatening as the rest of the school. I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breathing. The room was dark, except for a dim emergency light in the corner. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of the chairs at the back of the library was turned toward me, as if someone had just been sitting there. Worse, there were wet footprints on the carpet near the chair, leading toward where I stood. I knew they weren't mine. As I stared at the footprints, I heard a faint noise from the hallway. It was a whisper. No, several whispers, all overlapping and impossible to understand. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. When I opened them, the footprints on the carpet had changed. They had been facing away from me before, but now they seemed to lead toward me. I took a step back, unable to tear my eyes away until I stumbled into one of the library tables. The sound echoed through the room, and the whispers in the hallway stopped instantly, replaced by a crushing silence. Then I heard something worse. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway toward the library. I panicked and turned the key in the door, locking it as quickly as I could. I stepped back, nearly tripping again, as the footsteps stopped right outside the door. I could hear faint breathing, shallow and uneven, on the other side. Was it a person? Something else? I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, but the next sound almost made me scream. A knock, sharp and heavy, against the door. Then another and another. Each knock was louder than the last, making the door rattle as though it was about to give way. My entire body was frozen in fear, but my mind was screaming for me to do something. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands, almost dropping it, but there was no signal, as if something was blocking the connection. That's when I noticed something even more terrifying. The breathing on the other side of the door had stopped. The knocking also ceased, but the silence that followed was somehow worse. The feeling that someone or something was still there, waiting, was unbearable. Then, in the dark, I heard the voice again, but this time it wasn't coming from the phone. "You shouldn't be here." The words came from a corner of the library, barely illuminated by the emergency light. I turned toward the sound and, for a brief moment, I swear I saw a figure moving between the shelves. My instinct was to run, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. The figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the faint sound of the shelves swaying slightly, as if something had brushed past them. I tried telling myself I was imagining things, but the smell of mildew mixed with something metallic, like blood, was real. I knew I had to get out before it was too late. I summoned every ounce of courage I had left and ran to the nearest window, thinking I might be able to escape that way. But when I got there, I found the windows locked with chains I'd never seen before. I looked around frantically, searching for another way out, but the library felt more oppressive with every passing second, like the room itself was closing in on me. Then I heard it again, a faint, dragging sound coming from behind me. I turned slowly and saw something that still haunts me to this day. A shadowy figure, elongated and formless, crawling across the floor and up the walls as though it were alive. There was no light source to cast that shadow. It was just there, moving toward me. Without thinking, I bolted for the library door, no longer caring what might be on the other side. I turned the key so hard I thought it might break, but the door finally opened. When I stepped out, the hallway was pitch black, except for a single point of light near the main exit. I ran toward the light, feeling like something was just inches behind me. Each step echoed in the silence, but somehow it didn't sound right. It was as if there were more footsteps than just mine. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, focused on reaching that light before it was too late. When I finally reached the light, I realized it was coming from a flashlight lying on the floor near the main door. I picked it up with shaking hands and pointed it at the door, hoping to find an escape. But the handle was covered in something black and oily, like soot or grease. I turned it with all my strength, but it still wouldn't budge. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps. Slow, steady, coming from behind me. The flashlight flickered, reflecting in the glass of the door, but I couldn't see anything immediately. I turned around slowly, aiming the light down the hallway, and froze. Standing in the middle of the hall was the shadow I had seen in the library, but now it looked more solid, almost human. It was tall and thin, but its edges shimmered and moved erratically, like smoke caught in the wind. Even without eyes, I could feel it staring at me. A coldness deeper than anything I'd ever felt washed over me. The flashlight began to flicker again, and the shadow took a step toward me. That's when I panicked. I started screaming, banging on the door, begging for it to open, as I felt the presence closing in. Then the flashlight went out completely, and everything went silent. The silence felt like it lasted forever, but it was only a few seconds before something even stranger happened. A low humming sound began to fill the air, coming from every direction. It was like a chorus of voices, distorted and impossible to decipher. I turned back to the door, pounding on it with all my strength, desperate to get out. Then I felt it, a cold, soft touch on my shoulder. It wasn't violent, but it was enough to freeze me in place. I didn't dare look back. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor, clutching the door handle like it was my last hope. And then, suddenly, it all stopped. The humming, the footsteps, the oppressive feeling of being watched. Everything vanished. When I finally gathered the courage to look behind me, the hallway was empty. The flashlight, which had fallen next to me, flickered back on, its beam revealing nothing but the silent, still corridor. Then, I heard a soft click from the door behind me, as if it had been unlocked. I scrambled to my feet, turned the handle, and ran outside without looking back. I didn't stop running until I was in the parking lot, gasping for air. I don't know what happened in that school that night, and I still can't explain it. I've never told anyone in person, only here, because I feel like I need to share it. All I know is I never went back, and I hope I never hear that voice again. I've never been one to believe in those strange stories you read online, but after what happened that night, I'm not so sure anymore. It was a Friday, around 11 p.m., and I was alone in the office, trying to finish a report that was due by the weekend. I used to enjoy working late at night with the quiet and no one around to distract me. But that night felt different. I can't explain it, but the whole building seemed restless, like I shouldn't be there. I tried to ignore the feeling because, honestly, I'm a practical person and don't get caught up in these things. As I was typing, I heard a strange sound coming from the hallway. It was faint, like muffled voices, almost a whisper. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. It was late, I was tired, and maybe it was just the plumbing or the wind outside. But then I heard it again, and this time it was clear. Someone was talking. I stood up, more curious than scared, and followed the sound. It was coming from the conference room at the end of the hall, the one we always locked up after hours. The weird thing is, I was sure I was the last one to leave earlier and had already checked the doors before settling in to work. When I got closer to the conference room, the voices stopped. I stood there for a few seconds, straining to hear anything, but there was nothing, just silence. The door was shut, as usual, but something felt off. There was a faint light coming from under the door, a glow that didn't make sense since I'd turned off all the lights before starting my work. My curiosity got the better of me, so I crouched down to peek through the crack at the bottom of the door. I couldn't see much, just vague shadows, like someone might be inside, but the light seemed to pulse faintly. My heart started racing, and for a moment, I thought about going back to my desk and pretending none of this was happening. But then I heard a sharp sound, like a chair scraping against the floor, and I froze. I don't know what gave me the courage to do it, but I decided to peek through the gap between the door and the frame. It was a small space, just big enough to catch a glimpse of the inside. What I saw made me step back immediately. There were people, or at least they looked like people, sitting at the conference table. They weren't talking or moving. They were just sitting there, staring directly at the door. Even with the dim light, I could tell their faces were wrong, like they were covered in a shadow that shouldn't be there. They didn't blink, didn't breathe, but I could feel they knew I was watching. My whole body went cold, like my blood had stopped flowing, and I felt an almost primal urge to run. I slowly backed away, trying not to make any noise, but it felt like every step echoed through the entire hallway. Every second that passed, I was convinced they were watching me, even though they couldn't see me directly. My first instinct was to grab my phone and call the building's security, but of course there was no signal. That had never happened before. I stood there for a few moments, torn between running for the exit or going back to my desk and pretending this wasn't real. But something inside me, maybe pure curiosity or sheer stupidity, made me stay. I needed to know what was going on, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave. I walked back to the door, but didn't look directly this time. I just stood there, trying to hear anything. That's when I realized the silence wasn't normal. It was absolute, suffocating, like the entire building had gone still. Not even the hum of the fluorescent lights, which was always present, could be heard. Then, out of nowhere, a faint scratching sound started, like someone was dragging their nails across the surface of the table inside. The sound was uneven, almost maddening, but at the same time, deliberate. It was impossible to ignore. My heart was pounding, and my legs started to shake. I wanted to believe it was some kind of prank, maybe the security guards trying to mess with me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The scratching got louder, more frantic, as if multiple hands were clawing at the table at once. My head began to ache, the noise piercing straight into my bones. And then, everything stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. That's when I saw it. A shadow moved across the gap at the bottom of the door. It was large, much larger than any person could be. My entire body froze. Before I could process what I was seeing, the doorknob started to turn, slowly and deliberately, as if whoever was inside wanted me to know they were there. The doorknob stopped moving, but the door didn't open. Instead, I heard a loud click, like the lock had been secured from the inside. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. I didn't dare try the door, but the idea of standing there any longer was unbearable. That's when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The hallway around me seemed darker, as if the light was being drained from the space. The darkness spread through the hallway, slow but steady. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, casting shifting shadows on the walls that made everything feel claustrophobic. My instinct was to run, but I was paralyzed, afraid that any movement might draw attention to me, even though I had no idea what was out there. I started to back away, keeping my eyes on the door, but the further I retreated, the heavier the air around me felt. My chest ached, as if something was pressing down on it, making it hard to breathe. And then I heard it again. The sharp scrape of a chair, followed by a single, deliberate step, like someone inside was standing up. That sound broke my trance. I turned and sprinted back to my desk, grabbing my things in a panic. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay. My hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to unlock my drawer to grab my keys. That's when I noticed something even more terrifying. The desk lamp I had been using was now off. It had been on the entire time. The only light left came from the hallway, and even that seemed ready to go out. I didn't bother shutting down my computer or packing my bag. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the elevator, but, of course, it wasn't working. I was trapped on that floor with whatever was following me. With no other choice, I headed for the stairwell. Every step I took felt like it echoed unnaturally loud, and worse, I could hear another sound. Between each of my steps was a lighter, fainter one, like something was following me. I tried to go faster, but my legs felt like they were moving through molasses. When I finally reached the ground floor, I shoved the door open and stumbled into the main lobby. It was completely dark, except for the faint green glow of the security cameras. Desperate, I ran to the panel to see if I could figure out what was happening. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Every camera feed showed the conference room. The light inside was gone, but the figures were still there, motionless. Then I saw something on the hallway camera that made my stomach drop. There was a shadow, standing perfectly still in the middle of the corridor, facing the stairs. It didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. I dropped the monitor and bolted for the front door, convinced I'd lose my mind if I stayed there another second. When I reached the glass doors that led outside, I froze again. They were locked. They were never supposed to be locked from the inside. My hands shook as I yanked at the handle, trying to get it open, but it wouldn't budge. Then I saw my reflection in the glass. Behind me, at the end of the hallway, the shadow was there, closer than before. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just kept pulling at the door, begging it to open, until I heard a faint click. The handle turned on its own, and the door creaked open. I didn't stop to think. I ran straight to the parking lot, not even daring to glance back. When I finally did, the building looked completely normal, dark and quiet, just like it should have been all along. No sounds, no shadows. I never went back there again. I quit my job the following week and haven't worked alone at night since. To this day, I have no idea what happened in that conference room, but one thing is certain, those weren't people. I work as a cybersecurity analyst, and my night shifts are usually uneventful, just me and the blinking screens. That night, everything seemed normal until around 2 a.m, when I heard a sharp knock at the back door of the office. It was an odd time for any kind of delivery, and honestly, we rarely use that entrance. I immediately checked the security cameras, feeling a bit uneasy, and saw someone standing there in a generic delivery uniform holding a package. He knocked again, more insistent this time, and said something I couldn't quite make out through the faulty intercom audio. I grabbed the intercom headset and asked what he wanted. He responded politely, saying he had a package for me. That was strange because I wasn't expecting anything, and honestly, no one ever sends deliveries to the office at that hour. When I asked who the package was for, he hesitated before saying my name, but the way he said it felt forced, like he was reading it or making it up. That's when I got that weird chill down my spine. I told him I wasn't going to open the door, and that if it was important, he could return during regular business hours. The guy stood there for a few seconds, staring directly at the camera, before turning and disappearing from my view. After he vanished from the camera, I tried to get back to work, but the strange feeling lingered. To be honest, my office building is pretty isolated. There's just an empty parking lot out back and some trees that make the place feel creepier at night. I checked the cameras again, just to be sure, and there he was, standing in the parking lot. He wasn't leaving or fiddling with his phone like a normal delivery person would. He was just staring directly at the building. His stance was rigid, motionless, as if he were waiting for something or someone. That made me uneasy, but I figured maybe he was just trying to scare me. 20 minutes later, he was still there, completely still. I decided to call the building's security, but, as usual, no one answered. That happens a lot, and I usually shrug it off. But that night felt different, more urgent. To make myself feel safer, I double-checked all the door locks and even pushed a desk against the back entrance. When I looked back at the cameras, I noticed he had moved. Now he was closer, almost under the parking lot light, but his face was still just out of the camera's view. It was like he knew exactly where not to be seen clearly. My concern turned into real fear when I noticed he wasn't holding the package anymore. It was just gone. I kept thinking about whether he had left it somewhere or if this was all just an elaborate act for something worse. Meanwhile, he stood perfectly still, except for his head, which occasionally tilted slightly toward the cameras, as if checking whether I was still watching. By now, my heart was racing. The feeling of being watched so deliberately, so calculatedly, was suffocating. I decided to call the police, but to my surprise and bad luck, the phone line was dead. At first, I thought it was just a technical glitch, but I tested my personal cell phone, and it didn't work either. Internet? Fine. Every other system? Functional. It was just the damn phone line that was out. At this point, everything felt like a psychological game, and I was the target. I checked the cameras again, and he was gone from the parking lot. My stomach dropped. I sprinted to recheck the locks and realized something I had completely forgotten. The small window in the side hallway. It never locked properly. I rushed to the side hallway and crouched near the window. The glass was closed but not locked, just as I had feared. I tried to turn the latch, but it felt stuck, like something was blocking it from the outside. My heart nearly stopped when I heard a faint scraping noise coming from outside. The window was small, high enough that no one could get in without a ladder, but the idea of someone trying to reach me from that angle sent a shiver down my spine. I decided not to turn on any lights in the hallway to avoid drawing more attention. I went back to the control room, trying to think rationally, but the situation had already spiraled out of control. When I checked the cameras, he was back. Only this time, he wasn't in the parking lot. He was at the front door, facing away from the camera. The way he stood there, completely still, as if he knew exactly where the camera would catch him, made my stomach churn. Then he started to move, slowly, until he turned his face just enough for me to see that he was smiling. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was almost a challenge, like he was daring me to do something. I stayed glued to the camera screens, unable to look away. He didn't do anything except stand there, smiling that unnerving smile. It wasn't human. It looked forced, like a grotesque imitation of emotion. Suddenly, he started knocking on the front door. At first, it was slow, almost like he was testing something. Then the knocks got louder, more forceful, like he wanted me to know he wasn't leaving. The sound echoed through the empty office, making my heart pound harder. I couldn't figure out what was happening or what he wanted. I tried using emergency apps on the computer, but nothing would load. Everything seemed to work except anything that could connect me to the outside world. It was like I was being deliberately isolated. When I looked back at the cameras, he was staring directly at one of them, even though it was hidden in the ceiling. He shouldn't have known where they were positioned, but it felt like he could see through them. The sense that he was in control of everything was maddening. The air in the office felt different, heavy. Every noise seemed amplified, like even the smallest movement would give me away. I decided to turn off all the lights to try to hide better, but as I adjusted the cameras to night vision, something even more bizarre happened. He was just gone. I scanned every angle, every corner, and nothing. He wasn't at the door, the parking lot, or near the trees. It was like he had evaporated. For a moment, I thought it was finally over, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then I heard a muffled sound from the ceiling. Something was moving up there, slow, uneven footsteps. I tried convincing myself it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon, but the weight of those steps was unmistakable. It wasn't small. Whatever it was seemed to move directly above me, as if it knew where I was. The fear froze me in my chair, but my mind screamed at me to run. I grabbed my phone, still no signal, and hid under the desk, keeping the camera feed in view. Any movement there might give me a chance to act first. I didn't move. Every muscle in my body felt locked, like something was holding me down. The silence was deafening, and even my breathing felt muffled. The air had turned icy, but it wasn't a normal cold. It felt like it was coming from inside me, draining all my energy. I finally worked up the courage to turn my head, slowly. But the room was empty, or so it seemed. The feeling of being watched was suffocating, like someone was standing just out of view, inches away. Suddenly, I heard something scratching the floor behind me, followed by a faint whisper I couldn't make out. That was enough to make me run. I don't know where I found the strength, but I bolted out of the control room toward the emergency exit. I didn't look back, not even once. When I finally got outside, the fresh air hit me like a punch. I looked around, but the parking lot was empty. There was no sign of him, or anything else. It was like the terror had been trapped inside the building, as if it had never existed at all.